Alright, welcome back to my boss build series, and I am on Solar Hunter today, finally testing out Apex Predator with enhanced reconstruction and bait and switch. I'm using Star Eater scales with Blade Barrage for extra super damage when I have Feast of Light ×4, which I do so by picking up 4 orbs of power once my super is full, or after my super is full. This video is kind of inspired by a couple different things. One, I put out a poll for you guys, and the overwhelming majority of you voted for an Apex Predator video. Instead, I had put out a Briar's Contempt video first, so now I'm finally getting around to this one with Apex. I didn't really want to do two videos in a row on Persys, so kind of broke it up with Briar's Contempt with Enhanced Surrounded in the middle, which I used to solo 4-phase Ektar, almost 3-phase. So that was pretty good. You can check that out. I did that on Warlock with Sunbracers and Dawn Chorus with triple harmonic resonance weapons, so triple Root of Nightmares weapons. I guess against the Lucent Hive boss. That was pretty cool. I thought it was a pretty cool idea. I've seen other people do it, and it's something that I wanted to do myself. So, but with that said, I did want to do an Apex Predator video as well. So I'm doing that here. And given that in my last video with Sentinel Titan on Persys, I was basically claiming or showing that heavy grenade launchers are in fact meta for solo damage. And can certainly outperform rocket launchers with ease. That was with Regnant with enhanced autoloading and explosive light on Sentinel for weapons of light, and a void debuff with volatile, and swapping between Wither Horde and a rapid fire fusion rifle and Regnant autoloading in the background. So for this video, I am also doing a similar swap, although I'm not using a fusion rifle. That is mainly because I need to proc bait and switch fast so that I can unload all of my rockets, ideally. And if you do this in good time and in good order, you can dump all your reserves. That is without a reserve mod on your chest plate. So 7 rockets. You can technically unload 8 rockets if you only proc bait and switch once. But I was basically doing this trying to proc bait and switch twice. So because of that, 7 rockets was basically the most that I can get off. So I didn't even bother with the reserves on my chest plate, because I knew that I was only going to be getting off 7 rockets at most anyways. Oddly enough though, I only discovered after completing this encounter and watching back the footage and editing the video that I wasn't getting high damage numbers on my rockets. In other words, not all my rockets were proccing bait and switch or had bait and switch procced. I'd say on average 3 or 4 out of the rockets that I shoot in every damage phase were actually bait and switch rockets. So there's a problem there that I had to figure out why, because technically you should have 11 seconds of bait and switch, right? So here's the first damage phase. I'll get back into what I was talking about. I've just procced bait and switch, so then I get off 3 rockets right away. And then I Blade Barrage, and then I try to reproc bait and switch, refresh it with another Wither Horde, Callous Mini Tool, throw another Knife Trick to get Radiant going again, and then back into my rockets. And I just finish off the damage phase by unloading all the rest of my rockets. But come to find out, most of those rockets in the end didn't have bait and switch. And the reason for that, I discovered, is that bait and switch doesn't refresh. You cannot refresh the timer until it runs out. So if you think that you can just, like, say you got 4 seconds left on bait and switch, and you think you're going to be clever by swapping back to Witherhoard and Callus Mini Tool and trying to refresh bait and switch before it runs out so that you don't lose any damage, well, guess what? It's all for nothing, because the timer's just going to run down from 4 seconds no matter what. Even if you try to refresh bait and switch, it's not going to work until bait and switch completely runs out, and then you can refresh it. So this kind of pissed me off, because you don't even have, like, you can only see 3 or 4 buffs on the left side of your screen at a time, because that's all Bungie's going to let us see. So bait and switch never even comes up, so I don't even know. Like, I have to count out 11 seconds in my head, and by the way, I only know it's 11 seconds because Dim says so. Enhanced bait and switch is 11 seconds. Unenhanced bait and switch is 10 seconds, I believe. But because you can't see it as a buff on your screen, you can't even glance over there to see, like, oh, I got 3 seconds left, I better do something. No, it's just like you got to either count 10 seconds in your head, or you just intuitively have to know, which is kind of annoying. Especially because, like, had the buff been visible on the left side of my screen, I would have known that it wasn't procced for half of my damage phase. So instead I did this whole encounter thinking that it was procced, surely. You know, like, I'm not reading my damage values as in damaging Persys. I'm just, like, trying to focus on the goal, which is to damage him. So it was extremely frustrating, because then I lost the checkpoint by completing the encounter, and nobody's giving out checkpoints right now for Spire the Watcher, especially because it's not a weekly featured dungeon. So I basically had to redo the entire dungeon just to get to the to Persys again, just so that I can test bait and switch to see if I can actually get more rockets off on bait and switch. So I switched up my damage rotation when I redid the video. This is not the video, you're seeing my original video, because what I found out was it doesn't really make a difference. Even if you only get 3 or 4 bait and switch rockets off out of 7, versus like 5, you can do 5 optimally if you only proc bait and switch once, and, like, you know, use your super after or before, not during, right? So once you proc bait and switch once, then you just need to 100% focus on dumping all of your rockets. So you could do that and technically get more rockets doing more damage, but you're not going to proc reconstruction as often, because you're not swapping between like Witherhoard and Callus Mini Tool and doing your super in between. So you actually lose a little bit of DPS, and you lose that extra Witherhoard shot. So in the end, like, 3 or 4 bait and switch rockets with trying to, you know, doing your weapon rotations twice instead of once is basically going to equal out to if you had just done it, procced it once and dumped all your rockets, and then Blade Barrage at the end, right? So it really doesn't make a difference. And with all that said, that kind of made me realize, well, maybe Explosive Light really is just more practical. Because if I had Enhanced Explosive Light, then I would have 7 rockets with 25% more damage, and I wouldn't have to do any weapon rotations or anything. They would just all work. Bait and switch doesn't work all the time, and in fact, the buff doesn't work. You can't see it. So while it may be working in the background, if you don't know what it's doing, then to me, that's broken. So I wish they would fix that. I think it's not just a bait and switch issue, it's just like a general user interface issue, which is super annoying. But anyways, yeah, I didn't even after I like redid the whole dungeon just to get the checkpoint, I discovered it doesn't make a difference, right? So it is what it is. Either way, I'm still doing this in 4 phases, so that's pretty good. If you can solo Persys in 4 phases, that is very good. Like, I think 3 phasing Persys is like a record. So yeah, 4 phases is very good. That means if you're in a fire team, you're going to be doing like easy 2 phases, even 1 phase, because you have the option to synergize with your teammates and stack more buffs and debuffs, like Well of Radiance with Tether. But yeah. So as far as the builds go, I'm doing 2 loadouts, swapping between a setup loadout and a damage loadout. The aspects and fragments remain the same on both loadouts, except I am switching between Gambler's Dodge on my setup loadout to Marksman's Dodge on my damage loadout. And I can get away with this because Marksman's Dodge is a shorter cooldown than Gambler's Dodge. So if I'm switching from a long cooldown ability to a short cooldown ability, then the charge remains intact, right? So it would be the same if you swapped from a solar grenade that was fully charged to a healing grenade. You would hold on to that charge and you would, have a healing grenade. So you could do the same thing with your dodges. If you did it in reverse, though, you would lose the charge completely. So it's one thing you need to be aware of when you're swapping your loadouts. And also you should be aware that your aspects and fragments need to be all the same in the same order. If they are not, and your super, if none of that is the same or in the same order, when you go to swap your loadout, you're going to lose all your abilities, you're going to lose your super, you're going to lose everything, right? So just you can't hot swap loadouts unless you have 2 loadouts that have the same basic ability aspects and fragments set up. And then the abilities are like I was explaining there, you just have to be aware of what cooldowns you're swapping to. So for the fragments themselves that I'm using, Torches and Solace, those 2 fragments are tailored for my damage phase specifically. Torches will give me Radiant for 25% more weapon damage, and Solace will give me 50% extra time on that Radiant timer. So instead of having 8 seconds of Radiant, I'll have 12 seconds. Which means that if I refresh Radiant during the damage phase for basically 2 sequences of Radiant, then I'll be Radiant for the entire damage phase, which is important. Also, Solace extends the restoration timer as well. And so the other 3 fragments that I'm using are for restoration specifically, because Solar Hunter, Hunter, for all the solar subclasses, Hunter has the least amount of survivability compared to Bonk Titan, where your hammer just cures and your sunspots give you restoration, and Warlock, where you can just put down a Rift or Phoenix Dive or use Heat Rises to get restoration ×2 even. Hunter doesn't have anything like that, so you need to play into the fact that you can get up to 5 fragments, which no other subclasses can on Solar, and use those fragments wisely. So for this, I'm using Searing, Mercy, and Empyrean. So what that does is Searing is going to make fire sprites when I defeat scorched targets. Fire sprites do give me grenade energy naturally. They give everybody grenade energy regardless of fragments. But Mercy is going to give you restoration when you pick up a fire sprite. And it's only for a couple seconds, but Empyrean refreshes the timer on Radiant and Restoration whenever you get solar kills. So solar weapon kills or solar ability kills, that is going to refresh the timer. And what it does is, say you only get 3 seconds of restoration from fire sprites. If you get a kill within that 3 seconds, you're going to have up to 12 seconds of restoration. And then you keep that loop going from Ember of Empyrean, which is kind of like chaining Devour on Void. So that's basically allowing me to run around during setup, surviving from restoration. And yeah, you can't see that I have it on the left side of my screen, but if you just pay attention to my health, it is always climbing up. as I get damaged is just kind of coming back, for most of the time anyways. Then as far as the mods that I'm using on my survival loadout, right, because the main goal of my setup loadout is to harvest ammo and harvest armor charge. So that way I'm all set up for damage, right? So basically, double heavy ammo finder on my headpiece. Just swapping over to check on dim right now what my actual build is. With harmonic siphon to produce orbs. Orbs are going to give me armor charge. Heavy-handed is going to also make orbs on melee kills, which is also going to give me more armor charge. And then I've got harmonic scavenger on my legs, so that when I do pick up heavy bricks, I get more heavy ammo per brick. And then on my legs, I'm using 1-2 finisher, because my armor charge needs to have a function on my setup loadout. And importantly, on the setup loadout, you can't use decaying armor charge, because so any of the blue colored mods like font of focus or weapon surge mods on your legs, all of that will decay your armor charge whenever you have it, which you don't want to do, because you want to have the maximum amount of armor charge for damage phase. So that means you need to use either kickstart mods or finisher mods, the yellow colored mods. That is going to allow you to acquire armor charge and hold on to those stacks indefinitely, like at your own will. It's up to you how long you want to hold on to those stacks. But basically, there has to be a function for armor charge in order for it to work. If you don't use any armor charge mods, any of the yellow or blue mods, then when you go to pick up orbs of power, you're just straight up not going to get armor charge. Armor charge does not exist unless you have a mod that gives it a function, right? So that's the one thing with the setup loadout, is you need to have a function for armor charge. So I always use my class item and I just put a finisher mod on there, like either healthy finisher, which can come in handy, because healthy finisher, like if you do have to use it, keep in mind I'm not equipping it to actually use it. I'm equipping it so that I can acquire armor charge. That's basically it. But if I do need to do a finisher, then yeah, I would heal with healthy finisher, which can be good, and it only consumes 1 armor charge when you do so. 1-2 finisher is what I'm using in this run, which will help me get my melee back, which is good, because my whole build basically revolves around my knife trick. If I don't have my knife trick, then I could lose my restoration and radiant, and then all my fragments will basically be doing nothing, because I don't have my main tool for utilizing it. However, 1-2 finisher does consume all 3 stacks of armor charge, so keep in mind that if you do want to use it, then you're going to have to go and re-harvest your armor charge before you start your damage phase. Then Callus Mini Tool is the main workhorse behind my setup, and it's good for shooting the nodes as well. On this one, I've got Enhanced Incandescent and Unrelenting. Unrelenting is super clutch for doing dungeons, survivability stuff in general, especially with Incandescent, because then the Scorch can leech off of the target I just killed onto the other targets, and obviously Unrelenting only procs from basically multi-kills. So they do work well together, kind of in the same way that, like, on my Forbearance I have Chain Reaction and Unrelenting. So basically every Forbearance shot will heal me. So because the Solar Hunter is kind of weak in the survivability area, you want to use everything that you can. So like I said, I'm using all the fragments that I can use to get restoration uptime, And then I'm also using Unrelenting on my weapon. And then on top of that, I have room on my legs without solar weapon surge mods during survival or during setup loadout to use recuperation. So when I do pick up those orbs of power to get my armor charge, I'm also going to heal. I'll get a chunk of healing every time I do. So yeah, so then when I switch to my damage loadout, then I don't need my ammo finders, I don't need scavenger, I don't need to make orbs of power, so I can swap all those mods for just purely enhancing my DPS, right? So kinetic and harmonic targeting on the helmet, so that I get faster aim down sight time and better aim assist. And then on my arms, I have harmonic reloader, so that my Apex Predator can reload faster. And importantly, dexterity mods, right? Because if you're using bait and switch, you need to swap between your weapons, and you want to do so quickly. So dexterity mods will help you pull out those weapons and stow them faster. And yeah, it just makes a huge difference. And then on my legs, I'm using triple solar weapon surge mods, right? So for 22% extra damage, which is, you know, huge. You can put time dilation. I'm using time dilation instead of the finisher mod on my class item for my damage loadout, but it's like a 25-second damage window, so you would be fine if you didn't use time dilation at all. You can use whatever you want. Anyways, with all that said, Apex Predator is very good. Even only getting off 3 or 4 rockets, half of my reserves with bait and switch procced, it was a pretty easy 4 phase. Like that actually did a little bit better than Regnant. Mind you, this is not scientific testing, like I said. Different loadout, different super, different buffs. Not as many buffs as Sentinel, but still enough to do it in to do a solo 4 phase easily. So anyways, if you enjoyed, let me know, and I will see you in the next video. Take care.